When we start thinking about the tetrapods and how our lineage is, we have to look back in different years. So here's a synapod. This is 300 million years ago, and here's a very late cynodont. It's 1.95 or 195 million years old. We have this lineage that we can follow as we go through our process. We can go backwards or we can go forwards depending on how we find our... But the thing is a lot of times we'll have a lineage like this, but we're missing this one. So we jump from this to this, and it ends up that we have a problem. We don't have that link there anymore. But when they have the early tetrapods, we can follow those, and they eventually will go to animals that we know now. They evolved and changed throughout those millions of years. Again, a million years is a long time. So the geological record is divided into Archean, the Proterozoic, and the Phanerozoic eons. The Phanerozoic encompasses all the eukaryotes. We have the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic eras are parts of this, and this is where we actually have more of the life that we know of. This is where we have a lot of our fossil records. So this is just kind of a little geological timeline that I put in here. Kind of shows things as the different eras and the different periods. It doesn't tell us what's happening in them. This is just time frames millions of years ago. And we can put different, like here's the Jurassic period where they made the Jurassic movies right about then. So they've been out to, they were in the movie theater about 205 million years ago. Right. More recent life, the Holocene epoch is there. We have the Paleolithic, which is very early. What's the difference between a Paleolithic and a Paleo diet? What is a Paleo diet? High protein? What else do they call that? They call it the caveman diet, right? So you're supposed to eat everything that a caveman would eat. Nothing else. So no refined foods, no processed foods. If a caveman can find it, you can eat it. If you can't eat it. Right?
You're gonna starve.
That's a good start.
I said you're gonna starve.
You're going to starve? Especially today, right? You go out and eat a bunch of leaves or something, but that's about it.
Don't eat no fruits or vegetables.
Yeah. That's why they moved a lot. That's why prehistoric man was very movable. They were mobile. They were nomads. They lived in different areas. Even the American Indians traveled at great distances a lot for this. But in some ways, the Paleolithic diet makes sense because that's where we evolved. If you look at this, the Pleistocene epoch, where we have the lower Paleolithic all the way up through the upper, look at how many millions of years ago that was. That's a long time for us to evolve. And if we were evolving at that time, where we had early hominids, early man was coming out into those areas, that's what we ate at that time. We didn't have corn, we didn't have beans and all this stuff that we eat now. So we're actually putting in food into our diets that are not normal for us. They did research with this on the Hawaiian Islands. They took people that were native Hawaiians, that were born there and raised there and have ancestry there for millions of years, or years and years, and they put them on, they split them. They put one group on our diet, refined foods, McDonald's and all that stuff. They just let them eat whatever they wanted. and they put the other half on the typical Hawaiian diet with poi and fish and anything that you could find on Hawaii. And that's all they could eat. They couldn't eat the junk food that we eat now. The people that were on the Hawaiian diet, they lost weight. They become very thin. They become very, just like they would have been in those past years. The other people that were eating our diets now gained lots and lots of weight. They were not used to it genetically to digest that food. They couldn't handle that food. But the other people that had evolved into that food sources were doing a lot better with those primitive diets. So the oldest known fossils are the stromatolites, about 3.5 billion years, and the prokaryotes were on Earth from 3.5 to 2.1 billion years ago. So those are the oldest ones. I guess I should have looked at my notes. But most of this oxygen that we have is because of plants. We have photosynthesis coming into being. Now, how did photosynthesis take off? How did this work? That's another question that I've kind of always wondered. How do we start photosynthesis? If you remember biology, where did mitochondrions? What's mitochondrion? What's the deal about a mitochondrion that's kind of special?
It's in our cell.
What's that? They're their own cell, right? They were symbiotic. They came into the cell and they started producing more and more energy. Same way with the chloroplasts. They came in and they gave the ability to make oxygen and sugars into plants and evolved from that. So the chlorophyll, those types of things are kind of brought into this. The first source was probably from cyanobacteria. They're everywhere, and they produced some of this. But so about 2.7 billion years ago, we started getting oxygen in our atmosphere. Oxygen evolution is 2.7 to 2.2 billion years ago. This really helped change everything. It helped make it so that animals could survive. Up to this point, we couldn't survive. Remember, in the eukaryotes is different than the prokaryotes in that the prokaryotes really doesn't need oxygen. You can have life without oxygen. You can have facilitated, you can have obligatory molecule or organisms that don't need a lot of oxygen. Once we started producing oxygen, it allowed us to have higher forms of life to take over. Remember when we look at the precursors of the cellular respiration, we start with glycolysis. That takes place outside of the mitochondrion. And then once we get processes going into the mitochondrion, we make more ATP. But primitive cells only live on that very small amount of ATP produced by glycolysis. Higher orders require that oxygen levels to make things work. So the more oxygen that we take in, the more ATP we can produce, the bigger, the better animals that we can have. Now, unfortunately, in our lives, we're taking in way too many nutrients. We can't burn them all. We're getting to the point where we're storing them for a rainy day, and that rainy day never comes. Right? They've proven that if we cut our diets back 30%, we stop 30% of our food intake, at least other animals. We haven't really done much with humans, but other animals, if you drop their food intake by 30%, they will live 30% longer. Now, is there anyone in here that would like to just stop eating 30% of their food in hopes that they'll live 30% longer?
I'd rather die happy.
Do they die happy and fat and sassy?
I like my bacon.
I like my bacon too. So, yeah, so that's why we need to cross pigs with hippos so we have better bacon. My idea would be, okay, so I cut my diet back 30% and then I die of a car accident. What a bummer, You know, I could have eaten all that bacon and not have any problems. Still in fun. But as we look at, we see that different areas of the earth have different layers. And one of the things they look at is the iron. And this is pretty much put together because of the magnetic poles and how the volcanoes and things have produced this. So we have these iron deposits throughout the world, and part of this is because of the photosynthesis. How the iron and the oxygen are interacting. The oxygen oxidizes the iron and gives us the different colorations in the different layers. So our world is constantly fluctuating, and it still is. Every once in a while we'll have a nice little volcano blow up, spew stuff up in the atmosphere, changes the whole earth. You know, they say that there's a volcano out west at Yellowstone, that if it blows, it's going to cover us with ash. You know, we may have a couple inches here, or maybe a foot out west, but it's going to get us. It's going to cover everything. So what happens when that happens? What would happen to us if that would happen? What would it mean to us if that volcano in Yellowstone blew off?
Be like warm snow.
Warm snow. Right, but it wouldn't melt.
Exactly.
It would just stay there. So would that be good for us or bad for us?
Bad.
Bad.
Block out the sun.
Block out the sun.
Cold.
We don't need the sun. We don't need that stinking sun, right? We got Hy-Vee. They just truck in a bunch of food from South America that's not affected, and we're okay. Can we survive it? Yeah, I really think we could. Unless it causes a catastrophic earthquake along with it that wipes everything out. Yeah, we could survive that. It'll block out the sun. It might make it colder here, but there's going to be parts of the earth that are not. Unless it's so catastrophic that it does cover the earth. You know, and that's happened in the past. We've had so much volcanic ash that it pretty much blocked out the sun. And if you were with Leonidas, you just fight in the dark, right? So it's not a big issue. I watch too many movies. So that may happen, but the long-term effect is that it's beneficial. That ash comes in and it's very high in carbon, and it gives us nutrients back in the soil. So we've found layers of rock similar to this that have where there is ash built up over time, and those are good years with the ash. People have actually grown foods bigger and better in those ash piles than they have in the past. So maybe that's different. Endosymbiosis was what we had with the. This is basically your mitochondria and your chloroplasts. They came into the cells and changed the cells forever, made them more efficient, and gave us more energy. So an embiote is one that lives within a cell. It gives us endosymbiosis. And we've talked about that in the past. It's just basically the cells are being two at once, two cells in the same organism. Now, a lot of these structures and functions look about the same. And again, it's kind of unique to think about that this could even take place. How can one cell get into the side of another cell? How does that enter in there and then stay alive? Where does the nutrients come for that cell to stay alive? How are these cells, like a mitochondrion has layers, two-cell layers just like the outside does. The nucleus has cell membranes just like the outside of the cells do. How does that all structure together? There's some questions there that we need to look at. How can this all take place chemically so that it works out perfectly over 3 billion years? Pretty impressive, I think. So there are lots of similarities between the membranes. We have organelles are very similar in eukaryotes. In some prokaryotes, most prokaryotes, there aren't organelles. Very, very primitive, very simple organisms. If there are organelles, they have a specific duty. They have a specific function. And they have, mitochondrion, they have their own DNA. You can trace the DNA back mitochondrion much farther than you can nuclear DNA. So we have these different occurring problems in the Earth where we kind of devastate the Earth and then it comes back. We wipe everything out and then it comes back. So we have a second wave of diversification takes place. We give rise to algae, plants, fungi, and animals. So initially we just have these little probiotics, these little very primitive cells, prokaryotes. Then that gives rise to the eukaryotes. About 1.5 billion years ago, and algae lived about 1.2 billion years ago. So our first eukaryotes, our first attempt at this, is about 1.5 billion years ago. Then all of a sudden we got problems. We had the snowball Earth. We have lots of glaciers come about. Equatorial region of the deep sea vents, about 750 to 580 million years ago, started spewing out lots and lots of carbon dioxide. Our Earth was very cold, and then all of a sudden it got warm again. So we had this process taking place. We got the soft-body organisms that lived about 365 million years ago. And they started getting more and more diversified at that point. So that's a long time ago yet. This is still before the dinosaurs came about. So we have a glaciation, the Earth becomes cold, most of it's covered with really cold areas, and it kind of set everything back again. It was going, but then it's kind of slowed down. The Cambrian years were a little bit past this. We get this, the Cambrian periods, modern phyla start to be produced. Predator-prey interactions start taking place at this point, where we have animals that are eating each other. The DNA says that from somewhere about 700 million to 1 billion years ago is really where animals started to get more diversified. They diverge from each other. So explosion had a long fuse. It took a long time for this to take place. So as it started out slowly, and we started to have these evolutionary paths going, and then it took off pretty fast. Now, was that from the environment, or was it from other things? We started getting more and more cell stages in our division. So instead of having one cell organisms, the prokaryotes, now they started going through the mitosis phases. That in itself is kind of a remarkable thing. How do we start mitosis where we had cells to start to divide? What are the cues that came about in those early years that brought this from one-cell organisms to multi-cell organisms? So about 500 million years ago, we had the fungi, plants, and animals. They started to colonize Earth. They started coming on land. Remember, most of this previous was all in the oceans, where it's nice and warm, liquid, lots of oxygen, lots of hydrogen molecules, lots of minerals, usually very easily accessible. 420 million years, we had plants and fungi, became more populated. Then the arthropods started coming. What's an arthropod? Arthropods, what's arthro mean? Anybody know? Joints. Arthritis, get it? Joints? Arthropods. So these are animals that had joints. Before, remember the little bacterium, they didn't have any arms and nothing. They just kind of float around. Now we're evolving into tetrapods and arthropods. Tetrapods, 4 legs. Arthropods, joints of some sort. So the tetrapods evolved from lobe fishes, lobe-fin fishes they call them. That's where we came from, around 365 million years ago. Still a long time ago, right? In relationship to where we're at now. So we've had things go up and we've had things go down. We've had lots of animals come up and then they went extinct, just like the dinosaurs. They had their era, now they're gone. So what happened? What did this? So at one time, about 1.1 billion years ago, we had 3 times where the land masses all kind of came together. 1.1 billion, 600 million, and 250 million years ago. Our continents are constantly drifting, moving around this ball of fire, basically inside, ball of lava. And I'm over, so I'm sorry. I keep talking, but the class is over in 5 minutes. So let's kind of wrap this one up here, this last file, this one, and we'll get you off to your weekend. We call it continental drift. Pangea was the biggest part of this. They're always colliding, separating. We have plates that go underneath others' plates, and they become melted. They're going down into the earth, melt. They come back up as volcano lava, and then we have others that go over the top. Some erupting up, making mountain ridges, spines of the earth, if they, as they used to call them. And we're constantly changing. Even Mount Everest is growing. It's getting taller and taller, like an inch every year. It's getting bigger. So all these people that climbed Mount Everest 100 years ago or 50 years ago are getting cheated now. They're not as high as they used to be. So they have to do it again. I wouldn't. Does anybody have a desire to climb Mount Everest?
You made me think of Mr. Deeds.
Oh, yeah.
The guy with Blake up on top.
Yeah. To me, that has no, I have no desire to do that. They say that Mount Everest is so filthy, polluted with oxygen tanks and coolers and beer cans and all sorts of stuff that it's just sad that people have left things up there, and they've left bodies too. People die and they just I'm out of here. So kind of a bad deal. But we have experienced, not us, but the Earth has experienced a lot of changes, and it will change as it goes along. That's one of the reasons why people say there's no such thing as global warming. We're just in a movement of the Earth, a cycle, if you will, on the Earth. Right now we're a little bit warmer, and sooner or later we'll get cold again, maybe have another ice age. Who knows where we're going to end up. Ice age would be pretty detrimental to the Earth. If it got really cold, killed a lot of our plants, especially in the United States. We feed a lot of the Earth. If the poles started freezing up and getting colder, took away our cropland, we wouldn't survive. It'd be nasty stuff. So if you think of us as the Earth, as little humans on top of the Earth, we are just here for a blink of the eye, not even a blink of the eye. And we're so fragile, so very fragile that so many things can kill us. Volcanoes, glaciers, earthquakes, tornadoes, weather, wind. We are so fragile. We think we are the superior race, but we're not. We could be snuffed out in just a matter of hours. So, I'll leave you that for a Friday afternoon to contemplate over the weekend, how this all fits together. All right?